Okay. So right now we can just go to our tests and say, okay, you know what? Right click and run, right? Which is fine. But then this right click comes from where? This is part of the IDE, which is we're using. What if we don't use the IDE? Can we run our test? And that is the important question here, right? Can we run our test directly from this terminal right here? That's the important thing, is because when we automate our test, we need to be able to run it also on CI. And that means we should be running our test in non-GUI mode, and it could be part of the CI/CD process, continuous integration. And when the machine runs the test, it doesn't need the GUI like this. This is for us to create tests, debug tests, and IDE does makes our life easier in terms of debugging and being able to run it. This is a good feature for us to use as a human. For automation engineer, this is a good feature for you to use because it's easier, just right click and run instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go into a specific file, I'm going to click and I'm going to look for a specific scenario before I can run it. So, so that's why we're going to be creating test runner. That's the other few reasons would be test runner, not only to run it on non-GUI. Test runner is part of the framework is because what if you have multiple configurations? So what if you want to run a certain group of tests with one specific test runner, and then you want to have another test runner to run another specific group, right? And test runner in that case comes really, really handy. So test runner is nothing but basically adding a file, right? And this is something that unfortunately, I would say that you have to remember and how to add it, but there is plenty of online resources that we can use, and this is being one of them that that I was looking into. So basically, you add your code, you add in the test runner file. So first you have to have your package, right? And package is just to isolate, to make sure that we have everything in a good order. And once we have that, we can just add the test runner class. In that class, and again, this test runner could be wherever you want to put it. But for me, I just followed this file project structure right here. So it's inside of Cucumber options, and that's what I put it. But typically what I have seen in a real project, they put it under this specific path, right? So Java, and after that they create the Cucumber options and put it there. But seems like this is where the example that I was looking into, they put it. So I put it in the same location. Now in the test runner, right, up until here, this is just package and you're importing different libraries. And this is where you provide what you want to run. The first one versus feature, you're saying which feature that you're running, okay? Now, this is a specific feature that you're running, but if you want to run just all of the feature, then you can just simply point out to the test directory, which is the test package. So test package has 2 tests. If it had 100 tests, it would run 100 tests. So you have to make sure where you're pointing out to. The next thing is your task needs to know where is the step definition. And because of that, your step definition needs to be inside of a package, okay? So you have to create a package and then you have to move your step definition inside of the package is because the glue method works with only package, okay? If you put class name, it will not find it. Okay, so that's the way it is. The glue only works with the package name. So just keep that in mind. The next thing is you just have that test runner class here. You can probably use multiple other options, but you can really just click on it right here, run, and you can run it through the test runner file. You can right click and run also if you're using Eclipse. Oops, continue to run this. All right, let's just wait until it's finished. So you can right click and run it, but this is going to be run as JUnit test, right? So if you click right here, or let me show you the run configuration. Edit. So as you can see now, it's running as JUnit test runner. Okay. So now, if you are using Eclipse, and I think Ruma showing me a second. I'm going to see if I can bring your video here. So Ruma did the exact same test here, but then in her case, it's Eclipse, right? And the same test runner is able to run this test without any problem, right? And the only difference between Eclipse and the and IntelliJ is that this one has an option, right? When you right click, it tells you like, okay, run as JUnit, run as Java, run as whatever, right? So yes, Eclipse does have few things that is nicer than IntelliJ, but IntelliJ has more of that pro side than the con, right? But like I said, if you need to work with IntelliJ, and or if you need to work with, let's say, Eclipse at work, you're not going to be fall behind. You're not going to be the person to say, okay, I only use IntelliJ and I cannot use, Eclipse, right? Eclipse and IntelliJ, I think with the now near version, it's really, really hard to see the difference, because that even the theme, it has dark theme, and a lot of the options that Eclipse has nowadays, it's just really aligns with the IntelliJ as well. But at least in my view, when you're using IDE, so these are IDE, right? So IntelliJ right here is an IDE, and then we have Eclipse as an IDE. It's personal choice. Some people like Eclipse and some people love IntelliJ. IntelliJ being free, if you ever use IntelliJ, the paid version, then you will never like anything else, and that is because, okay, and that is if you choose Java as a language, right? If you're using Java and your project is choosing Java, not any other language, then you may like IntelliJ, the ultimate version, compared to Eclipse, right? It does have a lot more feature because it's paid version, right? So if your company is paying for it, you wanna give it a try. But either way, you don't want to be limited to a single IDE. Now, some companies out there, they will say we only want to use IntelliJ, period. Meaning like maybe the IT team, they only were able to install IntelliJ and that's it. The computers, you don't just go to Google and install whatever you need. Some companies, right? So if you work in, let's say, Bank of America, Chase Bank, they have a team to decide what you can be installed and what cannot be installed, right? So in that case, if they don't have IntelliJ in the secure list of apps that you can have, then unfortunately you cannot have IntelliJ. And right now, okay, so if they do have Eclipse on the list, then I'm sure they will have IntelliJ on the list as well, just because it's an IDE and they will probably have few preference. But when your whole project was set up to run on IntelliJ and you said, okay, I want to use Eclipse, there will be some extra work for you in the beginning, right? There will be some work that you need to do in order to make sure that it works. And then likewise, if you move from Eclipse and go to IntelliJ, there will be a little bit of work, but Eclipse I guess IntelliJ do have ability to export Eclipse project and kind of do that automatically for you. I think Eclipse does the same. I'm not sure about the automatic conversion, but there will be a little bit of difference in terms of being able to run your test and being able to write your test. But either way, both will be fine. I did have one company that just says, oh, not a company, I mean, one person who has probably limited knowledge. Um, he comes and says, okay, no, we're only going to be using Eclipse. And I'm like, oh, okay. What's wrong with IntelliJ? Um, and he's like, no, we cannot use that because this is what we use in our project. And I'm thinking like, okay, that's nuts, right? Um, but either way, you don't have to right away say, okay, no, that I cannot work here, right? You can just say, okay, well, if that's how it is, then sometimes you just do things to make people happy. Like imagine your second day at work and you're saying, no, I'm not gonna use Eclipse. I want to use IntelliJ, and that's it, right? Instead, you can say, okay, well, let me see what I can do. Let me see if I can get Eclipse up and running, and then just explore it, right? Sometime when people don't understand um, that, okay, this is just a preference, you can use either one, then just go with the flow, right? You don't want to upset somebody on the next day. Like imagine your lead who's like 100% sure that Eclipse makes everything better, and you're going up to him and saying, no, I want to do IntelliJ that makes everything better, right? You don't want to be that person on the second day, right? And maybe there are some good arguments because he developed the framework, so there must be something that is different, that is going to be easier in terms of Eclipse. So we need to make sure that we're able to kind of have an open mind when we join a team. But the IDE shouldn't be the thing that you should be hanging on to, right? Because any IDE you should be able to use at this point. There are other IDEs out there. Let me show you guys. And IntelliJ alone, JetBrain alone has a lot of IDE. So JetBrain is basically the company that created IntelliJ. So let's see what kind of tools they have. Developer tools. All right. So look at this. They got Rider, PyCharm, PHP Storm, IntelliJ IDEA, RubyMine, WebStorm. My personal favorite is RubyMine, Rider, and PyCharm. So if I work with Python, this is like my favorite. If I work with JavaScript, this is my favorite. If I work with Ruby, this is my favorite. And WebStorm is like JavaScript, but again, Rider does the same amount of work, so I just use this. I personally pay for this one and this one. These two I pay for. It's because some of my companies that I worked with or I work with, sometimes I use Ruby, sometimes I use JavaScript, sometimes I use Python. So all three. IntelliJ, I barely use it because this is something that I don't need to use for my projects, right? Is because like IntelliJ is good for Selenium and Java automation. And many companies, and you'll probably also hear this, that are moving into newer tools. There are new tools that came out, right? And it's like a couple years ago, new tools came out for automation, and those tools slowly taking over, right? So now what I usually do is whenever a new tool comes out, I experiment with it, and after that I implement into a company and they like it, and then and then they just move forward, always bring something to the table. So therefore, the companies that I'm working with, they don't use Selenium, right? If they did use Selenium, then I would probably use this. So now, as you can see, just one company has so many IDE, right? If I work with WebStorm, I should be able to work with PyCharm, right? If I work with RubyMine, I should be able to work with IntelliJ. It shouldn't be a big problem. So just keep in mind. The other one is that VS Code, and I'm sure you guys know it. VS Code is free, but it can be a very powerful tool if you can configure it correctly. Okay, so these VS Code IDE, a lot of people love it, right? A lot of people love it is because they are able to make the configuration the way they want, right? Let's see what kind of plugin they have. So as you can see, they do have variety, a lot of plugins actually. for them to be able to use. So this is good for JavaScript, Python, Java, TypeScript, C++, C Sharp, PHP, and PowerShell, right? YML as well. And let's see many more. Wow, that's insane. So all of these being supported by the VS Code, right? Which is crazy, right? So this is another option for you to use. It's not just the other IDEs that we just talked about. It's another option, and everything has similarity when it comes about IDE. Okay. So now when you write your tests in this folder right here, BDD automation, it doesn't belong to this specific IDE. Rather, that gets saved into your computer. This IDE is just hosting these files and folders to show you what they are and how they are. All right, guys. So now the test runner file is something that was that is really like copy pasting, but you need to create a new package inside of your Java. So just let me just run down this. So what I did is two things, right? And I added this because there's nothing for me to do except for changing the feature and the glue, and everything else is recommendation from the online resources, how to create the test runner. But your step definition has to be inside of a package, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to glue it, right? And it will be giving you some issue. About that. All right. So the first thing first is this specific package I just named cucumber option right here. And you can name however you want, but this you can also keep the same name. Then you want to create a class for test runner. Okay, so test runner, you can customize the name also because this is for specifically one test case to run. And maybe you want to run other test cases. So you want to make sure that you're naming relatively. And then we'll also talk about how to run not only feature, but also running with tag name, because that is also important, right? So if you go into your test, notice now the test is different. Test is isolated. Test is a package that only contains the feature file. Then you have step definition package that only contains step definitions. And then you have cucumber options that contains all the runners. So here we're going to keep creating runner file according to or based on whatever we need. So with this line number 8, you can say you basically have to go ahead and copy the path of the specific feature file that you would like to run. And you can keep this same at this point because why? All of your step definition will be under step definitions folder, in this case, the package, right? So you never have to change glue again and again and again, unless you create like 10 different package for 10 different kind of tests, right? And we don't want to do that. So keep that in mind. Any question on the runner before we start to move on? And this, some of you guys already did this when you had struggle running the test. So that's why I'm like kind of flying through this. And I'll give you guys this this link that you can also follow to create it. Test runner. Let me post it here. Okay, so this is the article that you guys can read. And it's basically just guiding you to say, okay, here is your test, and we already did this, right? Then here is the implementation of your specific test runner file. Once you do it, that's it, you're good to go. That's it done. There is nothing else here for us to do. Now, when you paste this, when you basically create it, there are a few things that you're going to see. You're going to see this is red, this is red, this is red. Everything is going to be red. Is because is because you're trying to import something like JUnit may not be in your project yet, right? So you're trying to import something that is not part of your pom.xml. So you right click and then it will give you option on your IntelliJ to say, okay, I want to install all the Maven dependencies, right? So right click, if it's red, right click and then click on options where it says Maven dependency and you can then install all of that for you. Any question, guys? Okay. All right. So let's move on. So now today is like more going into, obviously we're going to be writing more tests, and every class after today will be writing new tests, but we also talk about something about the configuration, something about the project itself, like something about our let's say utility class or creating something for the framework itself. So now let's take a look at the driver first, right? One of the things that we talked about the driver, which is what if you want to do cross-browser testing, right? How many people know what cross-browser is?
Just testing in different browser like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, etc.
Okay, so if you do know what cross-browser, then is it convenient for you to come here and then change it to Firefox, like the code, or is it convenient to just switch between different browser on demand, right? Through a command. Isn't it better to just switch between browser as you like?
Yes.
So most of the company that you will be joining, any company actually, if they have a good framework, then it will not gonna be tied to a single driver. So in this case, we can create this as a case statement, or we can do an if statement. Now, both have pros and cons, and case statement is good for something, and then if statement is also good for something. If statement uses Boolean, and case statement uses the actual string. So which one do you think I should use?
Case statement.
Case, right? Because we're gonna get, if it's Chrome, then do this. If it's Firefox, then do this. If it's IE, then do this, right? So case statement probably is better, and it's actually called switch statement in Java, but there is other names from other languages, right? And so we'll use switch statement. All right. So starting a driver, okay. So first thing first, we need the keyword switch, right? And then this is going to be our expression. The expression could be a string. Whatever is the expression here will decide which case to target, right? So that's our first case. So I'm going to say case like 1, for example, whatever it is, like case Chrome, Chrome. If it's Chrome, then I want to run block of code, and it has to be in quotations. We're missing the switch. Okay. If it's Chrome, I want to run this, right? And then like, let's say whatever, right? For example, right? And browser. So whatever the browser gives us, right? If that is equal to Chrome, then we can, that's the only logical thing that we can do, right? We can just run this. Very easy, right? So Chrome is ready to go, okay? And then we have missing return statement. Okay, return, we have to click this, okay. So it has to be outside, and then this driver has to be also outside, okay? So I gotta say web Okay, must be prepended with case label. Okay, yes, it should be out. No, it should be this. Okay, and this is the outside. Oh, okay, now what am I doing? This is my start. Okay. Okay, we're gonna fix this in a second. Okay, so now the browser option string comes from my driver when we use it, right? So at that point, we can switch between driver as much as we like. So let's say, what if you have, case, for example, let's see, first we also have to break it. We are EAK, right? So if that's the case, then we have to have another case, right? So let's say case Firefox. What happens if it's Firefox, right? So let's say we have similar WebDriver manager, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Chrome driver, we have to actually think about the Firefox driver dot setup. I believe it's the Fox driver is capital. Import class. Okay, there we go. Okay, I got it correctly. Let's see. Okay, so now we have the Firefox driver for two cases, and then we go and then we create another one. Always when you have case statement, you have to think about default as well, right? So a case statement can have default. What is default, guys? What happens when you do default? Hmm? Anyone?
Basic configuration, built-in configuration.
Okay. Uh, default is when you want to run, let's say, um, your you want to run a piece of code when nothing is provided, right? So let's say in this case, what happened just now, I'm going to switch back to what we had. So what the IDE is telling me, hey, listen, looks like you only have two options. Why don't you make this default? So the second option can be running, if the first option is not present. So by default, it will be, let's say, Chrome. That means if you don't provide an option, it will always run with Chrome. If you do provide an option, then it will choose between Chrome and Firefox, right? That is the switch statement that we have. Default will always run if nothing else is provided. It's like if and else statement, but else it will run for else instead, right? Okay, so then we gotta now fix our statement here. Let's see. WebDriver driver return shouldn't be here actually, and then okay, same thing. Okay. And the same thing goes here. The driver. Okay, that's fine. We have to right? And then I think we can do return instead of break, right? Okay. Okay, that's good. It's already defined in the scope. Okay, where am I defined? So this is one of the driver, but then this is navigate to declare variable driver. Okay, that's fine. So it's giving me problem not to declare the same variable name, which is fine. What's driver, return driver, okay. I'm trying to use the same name for a reason. Maybe if I do outside and put the driver, it will let me. I just want to. Okay, good. I wanted to create an instance variable instead of. There we go. Prepended. Okay, so let's see. Good, good. Okay, WebDriver this return. We don't need this break here. Okay, so let's see how it runs. And there is a problem related to this. So let's see. So everywhere that we have the step definition, now it's going to be upset, right? It's like, okay, what's going on, right? So you go into my step def, and now it requires a, if you see, it says that, okay, it needs a parameter. Okay, so what can we put it in the parameter? So if we want Chrome, we can say Chrome. Notice like how it says, okay, browser, right? The type and everything. So in this case, everything will go ahead and run. Everything will run in Chrome. So let's see if we go to our test runner real quick, and then this time we're going to use test runner to run it. Let's see if there's any problem, and then we go forward. All right, so it ran. So as you can see, the driver became a little bit more complex than your regular driver, right? In this case, now you have a choice to run in Firefox and Chrome, and then by default, it will run. It will basically run. So default means, let's say, but you still need to be able to, because this is a parameter, so you still need to provide a parameter. So for example, Chrome, I put some garbage in there, and it'll still run because the default is there. So I can go ahead and run it because default doesn't fall under any of the string. So if I go ahead and click and run, somehow it still runs on Chrome. What's going on? How come it recognizes like this string that I wrote? It's because if Firefox string, then it'll run Firefox. It's Chrome string, then it'll run Chrome. But if anything else in the world you type is going to run still in Chrome. Okay, so that's the work of default, basically. If we remove default for some reason, then we're going to start to see those errors where it may create issues. Okay. The next configuration file that we have to worry about is that switching between different environment. Okay, so why switching between different environment is necessary? So let's talk about those first. So every environment, meaning like you're running. Okay, so let's talk about how many people know about the different environment, right? So at work, right? So let's go ahead and give an example, because this is something that you need to understand before we even think about creating a switch case for environment, or even uh, control flow using if and else to make sure that we're able to switch between different environments. So now the question here is that um, when you work, let's say everybody here work for Facebook. Okay, so what are some of the environment you can see in Facebook for testing? And what will be your role into that? So let's talk about the environment, guys. What do you understand about environment in the first place? Anyone?
I'm not sure, but is it the UI and backend testing?
So
Like
test
environment?
environment, you got it right, but test environment is something that everybody has to understand, right? I mean, this is something that is very important, because this will probably come on an interview. It's not going to be specifically what environment you're testing, because those are assumed that you already know since you tested, right? Um, so in terms of your conversation and talking to your interviewer, you're not going to be able to say a whole lot because you have maybe confusion about test environment. So let's talk about that. Everybody here make believe that you work for facebook.com, right? Let's see, facebook.com. So now if you go to Facebook, let's say environment this, what do you think this environment is called? This is the live version of Facebook, right? It's actual URL. So what environment this is?
The product.
Prod, right? Prod environment. Production, not product. So we call prod for short for production environment, right? So prod environment. Now this is where you don't mess around, because this is actual user information and data. Whatever you do, everything gets logged every seconds, right? So you come here when as a QA, and we'll talk about that. And then you have the other environment right before the prod is a stage environment. And stage environment could be something like this: is they will give you the URL and it's going to say stage.facebook.com. And then before this, you're going to have QA, and they will probably give you the URL also. And you need login for each environment because they have different database. And then lastly, dev. So notice the difference between URL. So if you ask me and say, hey, wait a minute, what is an environment? And if I say these are different URL that we go and test, right? It's probably not a proper answer, but that is it. It's not a proper answer for sure, but essentially what you are getting is each environment have different URLs, because this is a production URL. Nobody wants to mess around. Production is only after everything, right? So first developers, they do their coding. And once they finish with their code, they push it to an environment, and is dev environment. So these environment, they're putting their code to see if they can do some testing themselves, right? And they want to see their product. They want to see how it works, right? Once they are done and they feel like, okay, I think it's ready for QA, then they're going to move on to QA. The next thing, it goes into QA environment. And in QA environment, we do our testing. This is where we do most of our testing, right? We're going to run our automated tests. We're going to run manual tests, whatever we want to do, right? All of our STLC. You guys remember STLC? What do we do in this environment? Somebody tell me the STLC, the whole stages of STLC. What will you do from the beginning to end for a specific user story? Okay, as a tester, what will you
It's
do?
test planning, requirement, test planning, development. I believe execution and closure, correct?
Okay, so the way you're saying is just that it seems like you just heard about this yesterday, but if you are somebody who works as a QA professional, then you should be able to say it more like you know exactly what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
And that's something that I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable saying, like, this is what we actually do. So this is like core portion of you as a QA engineer, and I'm not even talking about automation yet. So you have to make sure that you know exactly what we do as a QA engineer or QA analyst or QA tester. The first thing you do is you study your requirement, right? So requirement could be in an agile environment, could be user story, right? I think we did agile for this class, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Okay. Once you understand, then you can move on to the next one, right? If you imagine you don't understand what to test, like you don't know what to expect, then you can't really create the proper test cases, right? The next thing is test plan. Now, test plan is not necessary for agile environment. So what you do is that you can do very soft version of test plan. You can basically just do that in your head, or you can have a test plan document that is already there, just read and review and see what needs to be done, right? But I'm going to put that here as good measure. The next thing is creating test scenario. Test scenario is necessary for all kind of methodology, right? So you create test scenarios because why?
So we create test scenarios to so that we can know the user the realistic of the scenarios the user can come up with.
Exactly. So if you imagine like, and many companies out there will go ahead and skip this too, right? Test scenario is to list out all of the realistic scenarios of an user, and beyond that too, like whatever is more priority. But if you don't do that, it's kind of like brainstorm using your critical thinking. If you don't do that and you're writing directly to test cases, you may miss one or two. You may miss, I mean, if you become really an expert, then you may not miss it, maybe because you already think about the scenarios in your head. But there is a good chance that you might miss something, because when you write down, it is a better way to deal with the same workflow, right? So test scenarios, I would say creating the test scenario helps, because after you create them, you can also ask your business to say, hey, these are the test scenarios that I will be testing. Can you just give it a look and see if I covered everything? And then you move forward. So you can actually get approval of the test scenario. But if you don't write it, let's say you join a company and they don't do test scenario, I will not ask you to go and tell them, let's write test scenario. This is extra work for you. Whatever they do, you go with the flow on your first job. So if they are doing test cases directly, then you do test case. But for you yourself, create an Excel sheet and create test scenarios. So at least you don't miss. You don't have to show it to them. You can just create the test scenarios. It's going to be harder for you to come up with scenarios. So it is better to just write them down, list them down. But in a perfect world, you study the requirement, you write your test plan, you then write your test scenarios, you take those test scenario, you provide additional details like steps, description, expected result, actual result, then it becomes test cases for each and every single test scenario. Once that is done, you start to execute. Execute is done when that QA environment is ready to run. And once the Q environment is ready, and how do you know Q environment is ready? You go and ask your dev and say, hey, is this ready for testing? And is deployed to Q environment? Is this released in Q environment? Yes, it is. Okay, no problem. Then you go ahead and do the testing. And then you find a bug and you got to do bug logging and tracking. Once it's fixed, you close it and then you move forward with the next user story. After that is number 7 is basically UAT testing. So you hand over to UAT guys, right? UAT is basically done by product owners. So now UAT testing happens after QA testing is done. They will not go in depth testing. They will check to make sure that everything was done correctly. And this is where, what is your role in the UAT testing, guys, as a QA analyst, QA engineer? What is your role in the UAT testing?
Guide the business user during UAT testing.
Yep. So they, even though they are the one who asked for the feature to be created, they have no idea how the application works. So many times they'll come back and say, hey, wait a minute, which user are you using? Can you give me the user ID? And then you have to work with them to make sure that they have everything in order to say done. So basically they're approving your work at this point. So you want to help them to make sure they can finish their part so you can move on to the next one. So anytime they need help, they're going to come to you because you are the immediate next, right? You are the immediate person who was the last person to test that feature. So it only makes sense that they come to you. They can also go to the developers, but it doesn't make sense, right? They're going to go to the developer, but then the developer will say, no, I'm not working on this. I'm already moving on with the next story. And so he might not have the right information. Plus, developers only tested in the dev environment. So he have related information, credentials in dev environment, not in QA environment. QA environment information is with us. So in many ways, for the UAT testers to come to us makes more sense, okay? And then you help them to make sure whatever they need. They do manual testing, actually. They're just gonna do manual testing of the happy path. They will say, okay, let me see if it looks good. And they will focus on just looks and how the functionality works. They will not go critical like us. We're gonna be very critical and try to break the system. They don't break the system. They just say, okay, does it meet my needs? And that's it, okay? Because our job is to break the system. Now, where is the UAT takes place, guys? UAT testing, where does it take place? Which environment do you think UAT will be done?
I think it's stage.
Stage. This is where we do UAT testing. Stage is also a place where, let's say you have 2 weeks sprint. How many people are familiar with 2 week sprint? What is sprint?
It's the
Are you guys
agile
familiar?
scrum.
Right. So that means it's a duration of 2 weeks time frame when we do pretty much everything, right? Like we have already shipped state features. So now a company as big as Facebook, they may say, we don't want to release every 2 weeks because that's going to disrupt our existing users, right? So you will not see Facebook releasing every week, every 2 weeks, because they're developing every 2 weeks. So now they're going to say that, okay, we're going to release monthly, but what do we do with 2 weeks worth of work? So what they do is that in QA environment, 2 weeks worth of work is done. They will move it to staging and they will hold it there. They will hold it there. It's there and the people are still, the UAT tester, they're taking their time to test it. Then another 2 weeks work with another 2 weeks worth of work is done. Then they will move it to staging again. So now 2 weeks plus 2 weeks, 4 weeks work is ready. And now finally, Facebook is going to say, okay, let's release these 4 weeks worth of work together. And now in the meantime, they have plenty of time to do a few things. One is user training. So they can actually let user know 4 weeks ahead of time to say, okay, this is coming, guys. Like all the users, okay, this is how it works. And the new feature is coming exactly on this date, right? And they can do their communication if they need to. But most importantly, if this is on the Facebook customer service, if this is for the Facebook admins who's going to be able to do modifications behalf of the Facebook users, they can get the training and be ready for this kind of situation because of this new feature and what to expect, what not to expect. So in these 4 weeks, they can do user training. They can also create videos and post it so that way people are aware of these features that are coming. and many more. Like they have enough time to do all of that. They can also do additional testing to make sure that the application is happy and healthy. In a company that create, so this is an external application, right? Facebook. But what if you work in, let's say, Geico, right? And they're creating the application for agents, right? That is going to be far complex application. So what they would do in the extra 2 weeks, they're going to say, okay, release the 2 weeks to UAT, and then they're going to use UAT environment to train the agents. So that way, the next 2 weeks, they don't have to just sit around. They can still use the application. So you know how sometimes you join a company and they have training and you have to go through it. New things comes in, new procedure and process in the application. This is done at the UAT or staging environment. If you ever work for Chase Bank as a teller, you're going to see that they give you access to the system and all that. You log in and now all of a sudden you see so much money. You as a teller that you can now deposit, you can basically, all of that is not done in the live environment. It's probably done in a stage or training environment. They do have training environment that we don't really care about, right? Training environment is really just taking staging and making multiple copies, all right? And then just using for training environment. So just keep that in mind. Our job is to use this. So imagine like you join in Facebook, the next day you started to like, oh, I'm gonna test Facebook. You started to automating in production and you started logging in, saying hi, hello, and then everything, right? That's probably gonna put you in a very messy situation, right? We do not test in production like that, right? We don't go into production, especially like, okay, Facebook might be an exception because it's a public application, but imagine like a mortgage application, mortgage company. You go directly into the mortgage company, you log into production, you started funding everybody that is waiting to be funded, because most likely you may have admin account, right? Because you're testing everything, right? So you need to have admin account. Without understanding, you go in there, you started funding everybody. Like somebody applied, boom, okay, funded, done. The money is going out. Sometimes companies have automated process. So as long as it's funded, they will fund. It will automatically release the money. So, so that's why, and not only that, if you mess up a customer's information, what do you think they will do the next day or the same day? You work for a mortgage company, you go into customer's profile and you mark them as delinquent, meaning they missed few payments. What do you think the customer is going to be doing next?
Making
What
the
would
payments,
you do?
or they'll end up making the payments, or they'll call customer support saying why I'm,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So if they do call customer support, and think about always what would you do, so that way it's easier to answer instead of guessing what other person is going to do. Like you as a user, when you're talking about a QA engineer, you're really the end user who has a little bit more power, right? You have the power to make changes, recommendations, but most importantly, you have power to break the application and feel good about it, right? So you always think about what would you do in this kind of scenario. So if I said the same question, if that happens to your account, I'm sure you're gonna call the customer service. Oh my God, I was never late on payments. Why is this? That customer service person is gonna spend half an hour, is gonna apologize, and then lastly, he's gonna say, okay, I would like to offer you something, right? Just to be in a good term. He may just go ahead and offer $50 gift card or whatever it is the case, right? So now not only the company lost $50 gift card, they also lost customers' trust. This customer is going to be like later going and telling his brother-in-law or brother or sister, his family, that, hey, just be careful. This is what happens sometimes. These guys try to steal my money, and then when I called them, they gave me $50 to, just keep me quiet, but this is pretty shady, right? And the reputation slowly, kind of gets into the negative side. And so, but most importantly, what they will do, the customer service will call their boss and be like, hey, I saw this specific QA engineer on the log shows that he was the last person to make this specific change. Why is he touching the live customer? And then that manager, customer service person's manager is going to say, okay, let me go ahead and find out. He's going to send an email to everybody, like all of the leaders, right? So now QA director, QA, engineering director, all of them is going to get an email saying, we see there is modification and changes happening in production by one of your engineer. If this is happening in error, we need to understand what's going on, and we also want to prevent it for the future. Now your manager is going to have to deal with this. What do you think your manager is going to be? Is going to be happy with this? That's going to make him look like a fool, right? It's like, oh, one of your engineers doing this. Okay, the manager is going to be like, what? Okay, let me take a look. The next thing is now come to you and say, were you doing this in purpose? Like, no, I just didn't know. But like how you sound at this point, right? You don't sound like a QA at that point. What is the personality of a QA person, guys? Describe to me a QA person. Who should be a QA engineer, QA analyst? Describe their personality. Nobody can describe.
Confident.
What else?
Yeah,
And
like,
I was
That
trying to break the system and just to see if it's working.
Okay, but what else?
He or she
Perceptive,
has
perceptive and
to-
perspective, have different perspectives and perceptives. Be inquisitive.
Okay, what else?
Great communicator.
Right, but communication doesn't help in this case, right? So one of the quality is detail oriented. It pays attention to detail, and also somebody who has a very, very good critical thinking, right? If you go in the production and you make the changes and you don't go back and revert the change, can you consider yourself as detail oriented and critical thinker?
Yeah, also here also documentation also help the QA engineer. He or she has to show the I did the projection and I did the test and here is the record. It will be help for as a QA engineer. I did that before and this is the record.
So in this scenario, this person had no idea until his manager reached out. So that tells me lack of detailedness or lack of his thinking, critical thinking in this case. And also he's not communicating, but also he is not paying attention, right? Oh, I go and completely make a change and then I know I need to revert the change. Maybe I made the change for testing purposes, right? But then I didn't revert back to what it was, right? But most importantly, you shouldn't even be touching production user unless your manager gives you a specific user and say, okay, hey, here is this user you can use for testing, but you always have to revert it back, right? So in production, guys, like it's very, very critical. You cannot just go and change somebody's status on Facebook and then, and brag about it later, right? Or if you work for Facebook, for example, you are not allowed to touch anybody, period. You're not allowed to touch unless your manager. So your manager comes and tells you, let's say it's a brand new manager, he just have no idea. He's asking you to go and do some production testing to make sure, hey, can you go check and see if this works? And then the next question is like, which user am I should be using? You should be at this point scared to touch production. Production is something is very sensitive. So you're gonna say, well, which user I should use? Can you give me that in an email and then go and then test it? Just be like, I'm sorry, I haven't done in production or I haven't, production is very sensitive. So I try not to test in production. But if that is part of post-release validation, you need to have a separate user for production. And also you're not going to get too many users in production because of the how do I say, there are some restriction to that, right? So imagine like you have 200 fake users in production that that your team uses for testing. That creates issues, right? Because now maybe like the company evaluation, or maybe the company is going out there saying we have 3,000 users in our that uses our application and gets benefited from. They need to somehow deduct that 200 because that is not accurate, right? So if somebody does audit, this will create problem for the company. So
Like Twitter?
Yeah, it could be like Twitter. Let's say we have 3 million users or whatever it is, right, in this specific region. So now in that region, they have maybe 200,000 users that are fake, that they created themselves for purpose of testing. And like if that comes from the company itself, then it'll be problematic, right? You can probably create a fake account, it's fine, but they'll try to delete those with different parameters. But anyway, so the idea here is that I'm trying to give you what is the difference between different environments. So production environment, we only go and test when after release is done and we want to check everything that was released is working fine. That is called what? That is called post-release validation, right? That is the only time we do testing. What else time, like when do we test also in production? If you find a bug today, if you find a bug in QA, then you want to also go back to production to see if that bug exists in production also. So then you will do testing in production real quick to see if the bug exists or not, right? So depending on how sensitive your application, if your application deals with money, you will not even have production access, period. That's it, right? Sometime after a year or two later, if they trust you enough, then they will give you access. So this one company that I used to work in, mortgage company, and I was a director to begin with, I didn't have production access until 6 months later. And my guys they're working under me would come and say, oh, we need to know if that happens in production. And I would have to go to higher managers, just say, hey, can you just check this for me? Or I would just go to their go to the DevOps guys and ask them specific questions, or even developers. So that's how sensitive that is. Even as a director, I didn't have access in the beginning. And then later they said, okay, hey, Joe, here's your access now. Like 6 months later, they probably wanted to see like, if I can pass through the time period, the 6 months could be a progression in their mind. But production access is needed also as a QA. We want to make sure if you find bug in QA environment, you want to also check in production, because that's like going to be the next question. Oh, is it also in production? How is it currently doing? And you're going to say, I don't know, right? Instead, you will go in the production and you say, okay, let me check real quick, but don't mess with customers' information. Okay. So this is the second time. This is the 2 times that you will be going into production for testing. Okay, so keep in mind, staging is something that you're gonna go and do the testing, because let's say QA environment gets updated one time to time. Developers are pushing their code. Now staging was not pushed because after the 2 weeks, only then staging gets pushed. So instead of testing in production, that staging still is fresh, right? It doesn't have any changes that you are testing. So you can check the difference. You go to the staging and you see what is the difference without your change versus with the change that you're testing. Make any sense, right? You're comparing like how the functionality should be. Any question here? Okay. And then sometimes developers will do the same thing. They will apply their changes. They will see the difference between 2 environments, because QA environment do not have the same change that he just deployed to the dev environment, right? And you can also probably go into dev environment and doing some testing if they want you to do tests early before going into QA. But QA is our environment. Sometimes the name doesn't have to be QA, but that they can say, okay, this is where we do the testing, then this is our QA environment. if they say this is where we do testing, then this is our key environment. It could be something like this, Facebook, and then let's say 1, 2, something like that, right? It could be your queue environment. Okay, this is our queue environment. That's it. So whatever the team decides how they name this, it has nothing to do with the environment itself. You want to say, where do we do testing as QA? And this is the URL. That's it. That's your QA environment. Sometimes some companies do stage 1, and then you have stage 2. So they will say, okay, stage 1 is QA and stage 2 is actual stage. Okay, so in this case, naming has nothing to do with the environment. As long as that environment is being used by you guys, you as a tester, that's the environment you call as QA environment. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna give you guys 20 minutes break. Maybe a little bit more than 20, maybe 30 minutes. And when we come back, we're gonna increase our coverage. So this is one test case. We have to continue to write test cases, and we do some coverage. And then maybe this time we're gonna follow proper page object pattern, right? So that means we're gonna create classes where the test locator should belong to. We're gonna create classes where the test action should belong to. And that's how we're gonna be writing our tests in more proper way. So that way, we're as close as possible to an actual company writing the test. Okay, so I will give you guys some break here. So 12:30 sounds fine. We can come back until 12:30, right?
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's get some coffee and get some fresh air. I'll see you guys in 12:30. Okay. All right. So now our test case so far up to here, we want to enter address. So first think about a test case, right? And again, like I'm doing that with you guys, right? Meaning I haven't come up with a test case yet. We're going to create a test case, come up with it, and then we're going to automate it, right? So that's probably the better scenario here. So what if I want to move into the process 3 or step 3, and let's see what allows me to move into the 3. So moving into the 3 is pretty much easy. It's just vehicle information. Even if you don't enter information into the previous, it will still bring you here. But in a real case scenario, it will probably not, right? This application, again, remember, guys, the demo. So maybe they didn't put enough checks there. But if we go back, let's see. All right, if we go back, now we can do certain tests here, right? Validation. Aside from everything I said, like this text and everything, what else can we test here? We can test to see occupation, if all of the list of item are there or not, right? So this might be one of the challenging tests that we will do right now. Okay, so let's do this one drop down. Drop down is one element that is going to be a little bit harder than every other element. Every other element either click or view get text, right? These are some of the action methods that you can use, but for drop down, we have this. So what we can do is that we can say that this occupation list coming from the backend, we want to make sure that all the items that we're expecting are here. Okay, so let's come up with a plan. So if we're doing the occupation testing, the first plan, let me just go ahead and give you guys in writing. So our test case is to validate drop down having the values, right? Expected values. So maybe the expected values came from the test cases. And so now if I have to write our code to make sure that I create a validation for the drop down, 2 things I have to do. One is that all options, I need to store it into list, array list, right? All of them needs to be inside of an array list. Okay. Then, so I have to somehow get all the option one at a time. So this involves using a loop, right? You can use for, while, whatever is appropriate, right? So we'll go at that time to see it. once we have everything in an array, now we will basically compare one against the other. So we have to have our expected list of the same options, right? And this can be an array too, right? So it doesn't have to be even if however form you get it. If you're getting it from database, you can get it in string, and then you can convert that into an array by slicing it into a specific place. But I would say maybe list, and this will be an array as well. So your expected result is an array, and then you take the two array. The next thing you need to do, you need to compare, right? You need to basically, now you can say two things. One, you can use each loop and have within the each loop, you can have your assertion, right? Assert, and you basically take one from this and one from that, and then do comparison. You can do assert equal. The easiest thing probably you can do is you take from list one from the, and this is not a code, so list one versus list two, right? One is expected, the other one is actual. And because you're doing loop, it'll do it for all of the items, one at a time, to make sure that it validates everything. Okay, so that is our plan to do. This is the code. This is how the code is going to look like. Okay, so let's do it. So the first thing first, we have to get the, so I'm going to remove one so it only runs once. It doesn't run twice, you know, and then we can probably add that later. So then think about that, like, and can I verify all items in the drop down for, what is this drop down name? Occupation. Let me just move this stuff out of the way. UPAT. Okay, so for the occupation, right? So now let's go ahead and create. And we'll put it in here, and we will do page object followed by this. Okay, so now that we are here, the first thing first, we already know where we are. We already are in that second page. Otherwise, we wouldn't even see this information, right? It's already there. So the next thing we can do, we don't have to like validate if you're in the right field. The only thing we have to do is that the next thing is grab the value for occupation. Okay, so grab the value. So let's go ahead and see how we do that. Okay, so let me see what we're dealing with first. So you go into occupation. This is your drop down, which is select. And then you have options. Okay, option 1, option 2, option 3. So we know that we can use the option, and then we can actually go ahead and get the option value, or we can get the option text. In this case, I would give you guys a chance to correct me. Should I get the value or should I get the text of the option element? What do you think?
Both.
Value?
Value, why, and why not the text?
Probably text, there could be multiple choices. And the value is present in all of them. Oh, maybe I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
But look at what you're dealing with, right? We have to make decision based on what we have, right?
Yeah, I would
So-
take the text value of option because it shows all of it, all the different types of drop down.
Yeah, and on the value, the difference between value and the option, and yes, we have ability to grab both, but the difference between them is that this is abbreviated. This is short form of the whole thing. And we don't want the short form, right? We want to validate the actual string. Okay, so we'll get the text, but we do have ability to do both. Okay. So now with the, in terms of dropdown, we will do the same thing. We're gonna do driver dot. We have to say find element, right? But there will be a twist, and find element we can do by, and let's see what is the dropdown. So you got to go back to the select, and you got to see this is the name that we will have to use. So if this is the name, so we can just go ahead and use the name dot name. All right. And then once we have the name, okay, that's fine. But since you are dealing with dropdown, we have to tell Selenium what it is, right? So you have to provide a select. You have to give it a select type when you create the, when we create the dropdown element, right? So the select type needs to be imported because we're using it for the first time. And then okay, cast. Okay, we're gonna do the casting. Oh, we don't have to do casting actually because we have to use the new. Okay, then let's see. Never mind. What am I doing? Okay. New, and then we have to do select as well. There we go. So let's see. Three. Where is that three? Okay, now it makes sense. So you're using select type is because we're dealing with dropdown. This is how Selenium is telling you to deal with dropdown. So at this point, Selenium knows dropdown is actually dropdown. So we give it a nice relative name because it's dropdown for occupation. I will give it a nice name such as this, dropdown occupation, for example. So the next thing is getting all the options. Selenium will give you the ability to do it. So there is a method that we can apply, but getting it all the option, we have to put it somewhere, right? We have to put it somewhere. We cannot just go ahead and apply the method. For example, this dot get all options, as you can see, Selenium has it, right? Which is fine, but we need to be able to use this somehow. So each options, if I say is a web element, then I can put it into a list, just like before, right? And the list we can say inside, these are web elements. Each one of them are web element. Where is it? Okay, web element. And then we give it a name. For example, options. And we have to also import this, done, right? So at this point, options contains all of the list of items. So let's go ahead and just basically find out how many is in there inside of the options because it's a list, right? So system.out.println and options dot, I can use size, I believe. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and print it out and see what we have so far. And if I want to run this, okay, I'm going to right click and run it, and then we will also have a runner file to run the same thing. All right, it's done. Let's see. Huh, undefined, okay. I just want to see why is it undefined. At then is this, it's the same exact way that we wrote here. Okay, let's use the test runner. We'll figure that out. Why is it all of a sudden complaining? It could be also because I added some palms earlier that I can remove. The cucumber JNet core doesn't need it. All right, and then we're using regular JUnit, I believe. Let's see. JNet is there. Cucumber JNet twice. Okay. Let's see. So you fix one and then the other one fails, right? So that's the situation right now. But let's see now that I removed the extra. Okay, so now cucumber option is upset because it says, okay, wait a minute. I need some things, right? So anyway, if you see something like this, what do you do? And this is something that I was telling you guys earlier, where it says find jar, instead of saying find jar right there, again, more action. You click on it, hover, more action, and then do Maven, add Maven dependency, and it will bring you this thing right here, and you go ahead and add. And the next thing is, okay, that's it. Let me see if it's good to go. Okay, now it's good to go. So there was a specific dependency that I had, which may not be, maybe I wasn't using it, and then also that created that specific issue. But anyway, whenever you deal with a problem, especially if you're using IntelliJ, you can remove, even if your code is there, you can remove your pom.xml, some of those, if you need to. I'm not saying you have to. And then you'll see your code is all red. Then IntelliJ will tell you like which dependency that you're missing. So you can go ahead and add it back. The reason I removed all of it, I don't know which one I was using at that time. So when this became red, I realized, okay, I'm missing only the Cucumber JUnit. So right now, Cucumber JUnit is being used. One of the question was, why are we adding all of these dependencies? But Cucumber JUnit is needed for this specific file. Okay. All right. So we got 153 occupation. Okay. So let's start to print these items so that way we kind of get an idea, you know. So remember we talked about loops. So last time we did while loop. So this time we're going to do a for loop. So you guys can get an idea. So int, you start with int I is equal to 0. What is that? Right. And then you do your list. So you can say options dot size length. Length also works actually. And then you have to increment I by something, right? I by. And then int provided int, okay. And then we gotta say I less than, right? Okay, good. Any question, guys, so far? Okay. System dot, so now I just want to print the options, right? Remember get text, we talked about getting the text out dot print ln, and in this case I can say, so remember I is basically the index value at this point, right? Because 0, right? So I can say something like options, right? Dot get, there is a get method, and I can say I want to get the index of I, okay? And then I want to get text from that, okay? So for each one, I would like to grab the text, but I want to get it for the index for the time being, okay? So let's go ahead and run this. It should print all of the options. So let's go and run it. All right, let's see what happened. All right, there we go. So all of it actually printed out, right? So now in this case, you can do a few things, guys. You can say no, all of this list, but I would like to find out if unskilled is there or not. Then you can do a search to make sure that it is there or not. But if you want to compare, you need an expectation, the expected result. Okay, so we can do two ways. Okay, we can do two different ways. We can say we have another array, we create another list, and we have to provide this to make sure that we are able to look for these items. That's one option. And then the other option is basically to say, okay, I'm going to just look for one specific one, right? So maybe we can make this more reusable if we want to. So I can say I verify items in the drop down for occupation. Instead of items, I can say I verify a string is there, right, as an item. So I can actually probably say something like this. So it is going to be more reusable. So we're making it reusable at this point. And then we have to provide the option, right? So string, and I'm going to say option. So we can basically go ahead and assert this, right? We can say, okay, so it's going to go through each item. Okay, let's see. Let me think for a sec.
Can you explain one thing?
Sure.
Why did you pick option, not occupation for the string?
Right here.
Yeah.
This is a new variable. We want to use this, so the data that come from here will be passed on to the option, and then we take the option and we then want to validate that. So for example, you can now, if you go back here, this is upset, so item, you remove it, and you can say I want to validate something. I want to say it should have postal worker. Boom. Or you can have whatever you want to check, right? It should have professor. Okay, so this information will pass down to the option variable, and then we're going to say if option exists in this, then it pass, period, right? Make sense?
Yeah. So that's the variable now. Okay.
Yeah, this is the variable that is, and the value is coming from here when you use your step. Okay. All right, so the next thing that we can do in this case, we can put an if and else, right? The easiest thing we can probably do an if and else, but we can also do a search because this is already a list. So we can do both, okay? So maybe we'll put an if and else. If, okay, let's say options dot get I, right? Okay, equal to option. If that is true, then I want to follow a specific workflow here. And let's see what it is that is upset about. Operator cannot be applied. Let's see. Web element. Oh, this is an web element. Okay, my bad. I have to take this also. Extra. All right. Okay, that's good. So what I'm saying is, if option.get I, if that is equal to this, then I want to do something, right? I can say pass, right? I can say that's pass, right? So I can say something like that, found maybe system dot out dot print Alan. Okay, and then for example, like this, right? And, I don't need this test pass. Okay, maybe this is fine. Actually, better. Found option in the drop down. This drop down specifically, right? So only if this found, then it will say this, right? But if it doesn't find it, then it will not say it, right? So so maybe we don't need this anymore. I'll get rid of that. But if it's else, so anything else we want to say, like, let's say something like this. Test pass, blah, blah. Okay. So it could say something like, also found other options. And this time, if this guy is not gonna work, we have to grab this guy, right? So get text. Okay, so let's run it quickly and see what it is. Maybe we can change some wording. The wording may not come be. Okay, let's see. All right, let's see what is the result. So it says 133, also found option, blah, blah. Okay, so we having a small problem here, right? Found, oh, never mind. This is what we found in the dropdown. That's fine. Where is our test pass? 1 second. That one should be test pass, right? Somewhere in between. We gotta look for it. Really crazy. It's a big list. Okay. We're looking for test pass, right? And there's an easier way to do what we just did, right? For learning purposes, but let's show you this first and then we go into the easiest thing. Where is this test pass?
I think I just saw it in the middle.
Okay. Okay. I gotta go slow. Is there? If it's not there, we have to see what we did wrong, right? 153 again. Oh, okay, guys. Do you know why this is doing twice? Is because we have two, right? Okay. So we can make it more optimized. Instead of doing it twice, we can use the same one. Okay. So somehow it's not there, right? It's not there, so we have this problem, right? So now if it's not there, let me see my logic real quick. Okay, so let's not even print the else. Okay, so for now, I'm gonna go ahead and leave this to the side. I'm gonna run it again, and I should see only two things. So if this is equal to option, then I should see this. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna not print that. Let's print it again. right, let's see. So it didn't print it, right? So it needs to be, okay, so equal to sometimes has problems, right? So because of the way that it is designed to work, so we can do contains, right? We can do equal. I think we are supposed to do equal, okay? And this is something that I faced in the past. That's why I know I have to use equal rather than go ahead and use my own equal, right? Equal has, I believe, let's see the difference between actually. So in Java, versus equal, dot equal, because this is not the first time we, okay. In simple word, double equal checks if both object points to the same memory location where equals evaluate the comparison of the value in the object. Okay, so just know the difference. Yes, the reason why I put equal is because I use other languages, and the other languages you can simply put equal and it does the same thing. Java is pretty special when it comes about different way of handling different things. So the reason why it didn't pass is because we're trying to look for memory location, and it's not the same location, right? One is coming from one end, the other is coming from another end. So now if we run it, it should pass. Okay, let's see now. It should pass now, actually. So as you can see, that test pass found postal worker in the dropdown, which is great. So now, is there any easy way instead of me going over and over and over, like, you know, we're just looping through? Is that the efficient way? Because you're basically collecting all of the options. So sooner or later, if this option list is huge, it will take a while for you to do this. So I'm going to do the same work, okay, without the for loop. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. This was an experience and learning. And the next one is that since we already have a list, why not using the list instead, right? And that is something that I feel like we should do. So what we can do next is that, okay, let's get the option. We can say options right here. If options dot, let's see what else. I mean, let's see what do we have here that we can use. Contains option. Okay. What do you think this is going to return as? This line, what do you think it will return?
The list.
What is the options dot contains option? Isn't it sound like a question? But also hint is right there. IntelliJ is giving you. What is the what is the data type that you will get in return?
String and data type.
Boolean. No.
You guys reading this or no? Can you guys see this small screen right here? No. There is a small screen.
Returns true. Returns true if this list contains. It's a boolean,
Exactly.
true or false. Yeah.
Boolean.
Boolean.
Right.
Boolean.
That's what I wanted to know. Right. So anytime you don't know what this is the data type, you can always like click on this, not this one, but I think you have to hover over it. Okay, there you go. And then it gives you a little bit more information about this a specific message. So if this is a Boolean, then we can go ahead and say assert. And we can, at this point, we can use probably assert true, right? Because we're expecting this to be true or false. We're expecting this to be true, no?
True.
True.
Okay. Okay, so what if it doesn't find it? So I'm gonna go ahead and say something like this, condition. And I'm gonna say, this is a message actually. So I'm gonna say, did not find the option you were Okay, didn't find option, something like that, but you can always customize this messaging yourself. So I'm gonna say plus option, so it can kind of give me an idea which option that it was looking for. Yeah, that's it. So let's go ahead and run it. And then one, we're gonna purposely fail. So that way we can test that this step works properly. So now one, we're gonna look for this string, and the other one is postal worker. This one should fail based on our expectation, and this one should pass, right? Let's see.
I have a question. Can we use condition not equal to option?
I don't think it allows it. You can use not basically, you can use it other. There are different ways to use not, but anyway, I'll show you in a second. But did not find option postal worker. What? Okay. So it didn't find it. Okay, we gotta see what it is that's what we are dealing with here. Oh, okay. Again, the same mistake, guys, that I'm making, and you guys should probably. Okay, I'm making the same mistake. So let's see. But at least we get to see the assertion failure. Before, if and else, it wouldn't have an assertion. So when you say that you're looking for an option that contains, right? Option is a web element, don't you think, right here? So we need to create a string list, right? Or we can say, yeah, we have to basically create an array using the, okay, so we gotta have a, okay, so list. So I'm gonna create a new list, guys, okay? A list. I'm gonna give it a name. I'm gonna say options list. So now it's gonna be true option. This was an element, okay? Options element. I should elements. So all of the elements. And so that way it kind of, so we then have to, option list is gonna be, is equal to new array list. We'll create an array list here. Okay, so at this point, we have to start adding, right? So we can say something like for loop, right? So we can use the same for loops. And then we need to do this thing right here. And we can say, option list. Iterable list. No, we don't have to. We already did this dot add. So we're adding something, right? We have to. Okay. What we are adding? We're adding this dot get on. That's right. But we need to make sure that we're using this guy. Okay, so this new list is just fully going to be string, right? It will have the true text at this point, right? So now we can take this list and we can say this, and now it should be working fine, because before it was a web element, right? Yeah, now the content should work. And then okay, I just want to make sure that this is going to be fine. Your real list. Okay, we can actually we have to do this string and then array list before we do this. All right, perfect. Okay. String is this. We got the name. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this real quick. What is this? Replace with. Okay, so we don't actually have to provide this. We can just go ahead and do this also. It should be fine. Okay, I'm just gonna run it to okay, one should fail and one should pass, right? So did not find this guy, right? But the other one passed. Okay. Only this is the only one that is issue. So let's go back and reflect, right? Okay, so let's first of all get rid of this and then let's see if it passes fine. And then we'll reflect on this. Okay, and it passes now. Okay, so guys, what happened here, right? So question, anything? Okay. So first we collected all of the web element of the list type, right? And that's what's the problem, because you cannot just go ahead and compare with web element, right? You should be collecting the text of each web element. So in this case, we use the loop to say iterate over the web element and then get the text of each web element and put it into a new array, which is a string array, and add is a method, and get is also a method that can be used in order to get the data, and add is, so we use get before right here somewhere. Let's see, get right here. So in an array, what can you do, what you cannot do? This is something that we can actually get data, you can actually add data to an array. Any question on these three pieces of code, three different line here? We're okay. Everybody gets it? No questions? Okay. All right, that's fine. So now in this case, we are only validating a single option. But what if I wanted to do, let's say, more than just this? I can do this, right? I can say, I can do more, like, let's say, okay, I'm just gonna make up some occupation, right? So I can say hotel worker. I can say restaurant worker. And isn't it gonna be better for me to do multiple instead of just one? You know? So if that is the case, if you realize that you're going to do multiple option verification in this case, this is in this drop-down situation, then you have to have a separator for each option. So that way later you can split and apply the logic to your step. Now, if comma is a separator, then that's great. Then we can use comma. But the problem is, comma is gonna give you problem later, right? Meaning some of these already comes with a comma, right? Right there. So now when you want to validate this guy, the comma separator is not gonna work properly. You guys know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you say I wanna split wherever the comma is, and I wanna validate one item, right, at a time, The only problem that we're facing is that this comma is going to conflict with the comma here, and we may not slice it in properly. So now what is the next thing that we can use instead of comma? As you can see, what is something that here that they don't absolutely have that we can use to separate out this list? What can we use? We cannot use this. We cannot use the brackets. We cannot use the slash, right? These are already there.
Semicolon?
Semicolon is not going to be a good one. Remember, in Java, if you use semicolon as a separator, then you have a bigger issue to deal with.
Parentheses?
There are other options, and it's right here,
Can
right? So
we-
let's do a,
Yeah, I was about to say that.
let's use pipe. So this is pipe. Sorry guys, my nephews are watching some stuff. Yes, can you guys lower the volume? Okay. All right, so now that you have separator for all three items, we go back and modify our stuff. So now this option is no longer an option. This could be an options, right? This could be more than just one, okay? And that's what we have to put it into account. So assert with option, we cannot just simply do that. So this assertion needs to be now inside of it has to be inside of a loop. It cannot be outside of a loop anymore, okay? Okay, so let's first take the data, which could be option, could be now something else, right? So I can say option, and I want to create a list as well with option. So before that, split. Where do we split at this point? So wherever this thing is, right, I want to split. So it's a suspicious regular expression. Okay, so I don't think we can use this. This is already conflicting with regular expression. But let's see. Okay, I can use escape. Still, yeah, we can't use this one. So let's see any other. If comma is not the case, so now let's say, guys, one thing, right? Since we are the one who's providing this, and if we know the comma is going to be the only thing that we're going to provide, then we can use comma as a separator. But we can also probably use double space, right? Because there is always going to be single space, right? We can use double space as a separator. What else can we use?
Underscore? No?
No, underscore becomes part of the string, don't you think? Look.
Oh, okay, okay.
How about the
Um,
ampersand?
Ampersand, yeah, maybe, but then it'll be part of the, let's see, comma cannot be used. Even the period cannot be used. I'll probably use double space, right? I mean, I can give you guys an example with comma first and then go for double space, but single space is always there, right? So if we do double space, that means 1. Now you have 3, right? Let's see. What other characters that we can use?
Colon, not the semicolon, the colon.
This, okay,
Yeah.
1. And this, okay, let's see if it works. If it works, it works. Okay, so let's see if colon creates a problem. No, it doesn't create a problem. Okay, so everywhere there is a colon is gonna split. Okay, so first let me just go ahead and take that split, and I want to go ahead and print them out to see. So we still have to use a for loop, but before that, we have to create the list, right? Because this is a list after all, right? List, and then we give it a name. Let's say expected list, maybe, right? Expected options, options is equal to this, and this is gonna be string, and then okay, string array. Okay, so it's not the same way. Option. String and then okay, that's fine. Okay, so now we take the for loop. Oh, sorry. Okay, for int I is equal to 0. Expected is going to be I is less than this guy dot size. It's going to be length. I plus plus. We'll fix this line in a second. Let's just go ahead and print this first. System.out.println. The only thing I want to print here is option this guy with die, basically, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and run this. Can anybody tell me why we're going to such a great length with this thing? Why do you think we're going such a great length with the drop-down validation? Okay, so it worked. But why do you think we're going such a great length? Anybody?
Yeah, the values of the select drop down is, requirement.
The reason why we're going to the great length, because we can just go ahead and validate. We would be done already, right? Since we already validated something and we could have just done it one at a time. We are looking for efficiency, number one. Number two, we want to make sure that it is highly reusable. So, so I can literally change this for another dropdown. The only thing is different here. The only thing is static, meaning something that is relevant is this ID. So if I make this as a parameter, now this step can deal with any dropdown on the page, on any page. Okay, so we're gonna do that in a second. But first, we want to see the colon actually worked. Why didn't we use comma? We talked about it, right? Why didn't we use other stuff? We didn't, because we have options, right? We can use whatever we want as a separator. So why not? So we use colon at this point. Semicolon I wouldn't use because that may not create an issue, but it doesn't look good, especially if you are doing Java. So now we want to make sure that it validate all of the options. So now it's easy. Instead of printing right here, we just add this line right here. Okay, so instead of printing, I will go ahead and say, and then we are good to go. Let's go ahead and run it real quick. And then I'm gonna make this reusable for any dropdown. So at this point, it'll work for any dropdown that it can see on the page. All right, so it's done, and let's see it. So we should see some failures. It says did not find hotel worker. And that is true, right? I mean, it's not there. So did not find hotel workers there. And then what else? right? So it didn't find hotel worker and stop, right? Because hotel worker is not there for real, right? Postal worker is there. So now if I add something that is actually there, it should pass. We already validated that our step is not just mislated, right? So accountant probably going to work. So I'm gonna add few. So I'm gonna go ahead and inspect to make sure I can grab those text. Okay, and then so I want to also check to see if slash makes any difference. So I'm gonna do administrator. Okay, that's 1. And I'm just gonna do 3 for good measure. I'm gonna grab one with comma too, so that maybe like that's this one. Let me get rid of this first. Where did my other one go?
I have a question.
Okay,
So
it's
the
right here.
test will stop if can find the one we request is not there?
Yep, because you are using a hard assertion. There is a hard and there is a soft assertion. So we can talk about those.
So what if we put after the one which we don't have, we put the one we have? So what happens then?
I don't understand your question. So you're saying, so let's first clarify assertion and verify, right? So assertion is going to stop your test, period. If there is something that it doesn't meet your expectation, it will fail. It will fail and it will not continue, but it will continue to run the next test. But this test is done. Any of the step fails in assertion, it's going to stop. This test is no longer going to run. Okay, so assertion is good in a way because you don't want to run the next step if you're already failing one step in your test case. But if you have situations where you want to go and run the next step anyway, because you want to know at the end, then you use verify, right? Verify is another method that that you can use instead of assert. Assert is a hard verification, meaning it will fail the test. By the way, so what I did slash worked, and also the comma worked in this case for our, so we validating only 3 options. So now what did I promise to you guys? I said drop down could be any drop down, it'll work as long as it has the data. So notice like this is the only thing is tying to this drop down, right? Agree or disagree? This is the only thing is tying me down to a specific drop down, right? And we're using name. So what if I want to use education, right? And I want to use the same exact stuff. Can I use it? Okay, for education, can I use this? It also have name. Even if it didn't have name, I could have also used it, right? So let's do that. Okay, so now it says verify string in that dropdown for occupation. So instead of occupation, I'm going to replace that to the dropdown, right, locator. So this one becomes string locator. Okay, so now I will go ahead and say, okay, if it has a name, it should be a locator. That's it, done. Okay, so now I go back and my step is all upset. All I have to do for drop down for, let's see. And this is where I'm going to provide the locator, guys. Okay, so now at this point, as long as I have a locator, I can make it work for any let's see. Occupation. So this is going to work for the occupation, but now I want to use the same one for the education, right? Let's scrap that education. This is the education one. Okay, now education, we definitely have different options, so we can grab those. It does have some high school So copy. So you got the some high school, and then we can get the GED maybe. GED, and then the next one could be, let's just do 3. And we can possibly add all of them, but a bachelor, maybe a master degree. All right, that's it. Any question? Anybody wants to tell me if it's not going to work or if it's going to work? Is it going to work? Yes or no? It's not going to work? Why? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let's, one person said yes. So let's see. And everybody else saying no, it's not going to work. Okay. Get it. Let's see. Let's run it. Okay, and it passed, right? So one dropdown has 153 option and the other one has 12 option. Right, so we dealt with two different dropdown. So what if I have to deal with all of them? See how many dropdown there is? Do I have to write any more code? All I have to do is what I want to verify inside of them and what I need from the dropdown, and that's it. And that's all I need for the dropdown. Okay, so like now let's talk about selecting an option in the dropdown, right? So we'll make it a reusable step also. So I can say, all right, so we pretty much just validated these two, but I want to select occupation, adjuster, maybe. I want to select adjuster than occupation. And I want to select education as, let's say, bachelor degree, right? These are the two options that I want to select since I verified already. So now I'm going to say, then I maybe end, and I select something, right? Option in drop down. I don't know what is that something. So I select this option in drop down. I don't know what drop down that is. So that way I can use it again and again and again. Okay, notice we got the two string, argument 1, argument 2. So I'm going to say if the first one is actually option. And the second one is actually the locator, right? So now remember how we dealt with dropdown before? So we have to basically, whenever we're dealing with dropdown, we have to use this classes, right? Select class, because that way Selenium knows what we're dealing with. So in this case, this is our dropdown where we're saying select new select. So we're basically just telling Selenium, hey, we're creating a web element and it'll be a dropdown. It's a select type. Select type will give us more options. Now select does have a lot more objects that we can use, or sorry, a lot more methods that we can use. So now that we created a select type, we can say dropdown dot, and now we have all the options. So get options we already used. We no longer need that. Especially for this, we don't need that. Now we can see it says deselect by value. Do we have to deselect? No, we want to select. We want to actually, we want to select some values. So now it tells us that select by index is one option. And it needs something under. And then we have drop down dot select by, let's see what else we have. Select by visible text. Let's see, what else do we have? And select by, what else? Let's see. Select by value, that's it. So you do have 3 available tool. Index is just a number. So if you want the second option, doesn't matter what it is, then you select. You don't care about what options you're selecting. You just want to select the second option, then that's it. This is it. Okay. This one, if you care about visible text, meaning that you want to use the text itself to select, then you put it here, right? If this one you want to select by value, we already know the difference between value and text, correct? Everybody knows the difference between value right here and then the text. So you can, a drop down can be selected, an option can be selected using all 3. For now, we're going to use visible text. Okay. So I'm going to leave this to comment it out, and I'm going to say option. And that's it. Now this will work for anything, right? So, so for the occupation, this is the drop down occupation. I want to select, let's say, we talked about the adjuster. Okay, and then for the education, we want to add bachelor degree. Let's find that bachelor degree. Okay, so I'm gonna run it real quick and then we'll see. So after today, you guys should have no problem dealing with dropdown, right? So we got the adjuster and we got the bachelor degree selected. All right, and we're able to reuse everything. So now can you reuse? So at which case you cannot reuse these steps, guys? And in which scenario, or what could be one of the situation that you cannot use these 4 steps that are highly reusable? It's 1:44. I'm gonna give you guys some Q&A, but can somebody answer me?
What about if we're on a different page?
Yeah, it will work. Different page as long as it has the locator, right? So remember, the locator is tied to something. The locator is tied to name because we're saying, okay, we're only working with name. Okay, so in this case, if an element do not have a name, for example, this guy, if you inspect, let's see. If this guy did not have a name, then we could not get the same result, right? Now, how to avoid this kind of scenario where we're trying to name only? We can just do XPath or we can just do CSS locator. Everybody has a XPath or everybody has a CSS locator, meaning every single element, even if they don't, we can make one, right? So it would be safer for me to use CSS selector than the name. But in this case, this is just an example. So we're fine. All right, it's 1:45. What I would like for you guys to do is that I want you to, so we did the validation for each few drop downs today. What I want you guys to do, add being able to select your specific option from here and validating each and every single drop down that you have. The year, date, basically date of birth, these you don't have to, like usually these you always have the right options because this comes from maybe a specific library the developers are using, but this becomes really time consuming when you want to check all of them, but you can use the same method. Let's see if it has the name, if you want to use the same. This one also have names. They're pretty good about the locators. So you can also validate these 3 if you want to. Day, and then you got the year, this is where it becomes crazy, right? How many years you can validate. But anyway, you have to boundary value. You have to do basically use boundary value analysis to validate. So you can say, what is the current year you want to validate and what is the year that it should have, like meaning what is the lowest year? And you have to look at your requirement document. Maybe 1990 was the lowest, and that's it. So you can say 1990 to now should be there. So I should just validate 1990 and 1990, 2022. That's it. So some of the decisions that we have to make based on understanding days, it could be 30 days, or it could be 31 days, or it could be 32 days, depending on which month. We don't want to fail that. So you can say as long as it's 28, 1 to 28 is there, then we're good to go, right? What is the lowest amount you can have, basically, right? You can also add more logic. If it's January, you should have this. You can do the logic for the whole year to do the validation, but that going above and beyond, right? Okay, so what I need for you guys to do before Tuesday is just validating the dropdown and adding an option. So it could be North Carolina, it could be whatever it is, your city, add value here. And I want completely choosing all the options that we have here and moving into the next step, okay? And that's what I want you guys to do. The next one is even huge right here. Let's see. This is going to be a giant test case by the time you guys are done. But once you guys get to this page, consider you're done. At least the homework portion is done. And the next class will probably just start off with the page object. There is two things that we will do with page object, right? And I will give you guys an idea. So page object, basically, page object model. Most likely all the companies out there are using, right? And what we are trying to do is that we are trying to put the locators separate, as you can see right here. And then we're trying to also put the actions separate, right? Page object. And then we want to use it in our method. We want to call them when we need it to use them. And this actually does few things. Number one is that aside from encapsulation, you can also reuse locators. So if you have, let's say, one locator and you have to deal with this locator again and again, you don't have to copy and paste. You can just call it whenever you need. And same thing, if you have an action like click action and you want to click on that specific locator, you don't have to do it again and again. You can just call that locator. So what it does is that it allows you to have less code for the same amount of work, and it allows you to reuse any component you create, which makes it easier to maintain your code, and it makes it easier to automate and manage our automation. Now, this is just page object patterns, and now let's talk about the page object factory. And we're probably going to look into the page object factory before we go into the, page object model using the page factory. And we're going to look into this because this has a very good design pattern. We can create ourselves a page object pattern. It's not a problem, but we will not have as good as this because this is somebody, they put years worth of work to create the pattern, which is basically have some rules and regulations in terms of how to create the object and how we're going to be reusing the object. So right here, so we'll probably go over this, the first thing, the next class. Once I do the page object, that'll be pretty much almost end of our Java, Selenium, and Cucumber, because again, at this point, I want you guys to make the progress, right? I want you guys to create more and more and more tests. So page object is probably the last topic for me before I'm going to start to say, okay, I want to now see 2-3 test cases per day. I want to see at least 1 test case per day for you to automate. And then I'm going to go on to GitHub. GitHub is 120% necessary because how will you deliver your code if you don't even know how to, right? So now I'm going to show you GitHub, how to use from the IDE itself from here, how to connect your GitHub to your IDE. And I'm going to show you how to use actual command of GitHub through terminal or through CMD or Git bash, right? If you have Windows, we're going to use Git bash. If you have terminal, we're going to use terminal on your Mac. The difference between both command is almost nothing. Like there is no difference because Git GUI, sorry, Git bash and terminal will take almost all of the same command. So we're going to be fine. So once I finish with GitHub, I will then give you a final project for you to automate and create the test cases yourself and then automate them. And then we're going to move on to the next topic, which is SQL. Once the SQL is done, I'm going to start to start to think about marketing. Some people are all, if you feel like you're ready and you are already good with SQL, I'm going to market you early. I don't mind taking people early because then I don't have to deal with everybody at the same time, right? One at a time is fine. And then we go from there, right? So the distance between you and the job is not far at this point, right? Once you hit the market, what's going to happen? Once you hit the market, your resume is visible to everybody. And you don't even have to apply at this point. They're just going to reach out to you and say, hey, do you want to apply for this? Or do you want to submit your resume for this position? And you're going to say yes. And you're going to go through the struggle of setting up the interview and learning from mistakes, right? Meaning in the beginning, 1 or 2 interview, we're going to basically mess up, right? But then when your 3rd or 4th interview, you should be fine. If you bring up a true interview, 3rd or 4th interview should be enough for you to get a job, right? But again, that's if you did everything correctly. So market as well as the job is not too far away at this point for you guys. It's about you, how fast you're moving. And keep in mind, you're going to go through a mock interview. So if you don't pass the mock interview, you're going to be repeating the class. You're going to be in the class. You're going to be either we have a new badge started, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So you might just join that badge if you are not able to pass the mock interview. But I hope everybody's going to pass. So everybody's
How
going to be
many
fine.
tries do we have for the mock interview?
You can have as many, right? Like if you did 1 mock and then be like, oh, okay, you know what? You got some feedback from the mock interview. And we talked about, okay, you got to express your technical abilities better and this way and that way. And just keep in mind, we're not just expecting things from you without giving you that kind of details. We're going to give you I think like 10-page worth of document that has questions. That document has question and answer in writing. Okay, even tell me about yourself, even what company you worked in, what was the project. So all of the detail in that document. And the mock interview is going to be based off of that document. It's not going to be like out of blue. We're asking questions that may not be, something that is you're not familiar with. We don't want to catch you guys off guard. So we will give you things that we already talked about. And if you're fine, then we will move forward. Because there are at least some basics that we need to have before we can even think about preparing you for the market. Once you hit the market, trust me, there is no more learning. Once you hit the market, once your resume is out there, even if you want, there is no learning. You can't. Like, it's not me telling you don't learn anymore. You just cannot focus anymore. Now you're 2 things. One, you're going to be focusing on recruiters and their calls. And after 5 p.m., 6 p.m., you're going to be exhausted. And the exhaustion is not going to come because, you just you just talk to too many people today. It's just throughout the whole day, you might talk to 5 or 6 people, and you will definitely have to prepare what you're going to talk about. You're going to have to take things to the side. And every day after 5, 6, or 7 p.m., you're going to say, okay, I just want to relax for now, right? And you'll probably do that, and that's totally fine. But that's why I said, once your resume is visible and out there, learning, you don't have a lot of time for learning. You just have time to go update your resume, go check your LinkedIn message, go check, your emails, pick up a phone call, and or prepare for the next day who you're going to talk to. Maybe they have a specific questions you want to prepare ahead of time. So all of that, right? But now you can't even really get into say, I'm going to learn new things. So that's why just focus now as much as you can. You're still not late. If you feel like you're late, you're still not late. Just catch up at least up to this point, and you're going to be fine. But remember, manual testing is something that we don't even want to consider that, okay, no, if you're automation, you can't, it's okay. No, it's not okay to not know manual testing for any kind of testing opportunity, right? It's not okay at all. If somebody doesn't know what STLC or SDLC is, go to our previous videos, watch them, or there is Udemy courses that we bought for you guys. If you have access to Udemy, go ahead and use it to brush up. But manual testing, if you don't know it, it's not okay at all. Because yeah, that's gonna be something, right? If you don't know manual testing and not able to express you as a QA, what your responsibilities are, you're not going to be able to even make a lot of conversation with the recruiters. So, but also like, it doesn't make sense, right? Even if your resume has 2 years of experience, doesn't make sense if you don't know how to like do basics of testing. So STLC and SDLC is something that you want to really, really be master on. But automation, trust me, the bar is very low. What I mean by that is if somebody's calling you and you're not able to answer a specific automation question, that's okay. They will move on, and they're not going to criticize you or nothing, because not everybody knows like really, not everybody has the expertise on automation, because there is two kind of automation engineers. One that writes the test from scratch, and the other one that just updates and runs, right? So if things comes to that point where you have to say, okay, I'm sorry, but I don't write them from scratch, I'm just maintaining it and running it, right? Let's say you're not able to answer a specific question or something, you can even go into that route. But if you don't know the manual test question, then you're gonna say, wait a minute, but you have like 2 years of experience on testing. How come you can't even answer what is a regression test? So it's really, really critical and important that you get the easy things out of the way. Technical stuff, everybody's gonna give you, a pass, right? If you can't, then okay, all right, not a problem. And they will move on, right? They'll move on to the next question. So just keep that in mind. Manual testing is 100% needed in order for us to move you forward to the market. And not only that, in order for you to be successful in getting a job, okay? All right, guys, so in this case, we will meet on Tuesday. I expect all of the drop down, not just the ones that we took care of it, but all of the drop down to be validated and automated and move on to the next step, okay, for the next class, guys. You can continue to send me the video. The other thing, sometimes I put love, sometimes I put the thumbs up, but I will, I don't know, there is no formalization to that. If I didn't like something, I will give you a comment. If there is no comment, that means it was good and I liked it. But sometimes it's too soon for me to say anything. I need to look at it, then I'll just put a thumbs up. That means I'm looking at it, and then I'll give you guys a feedback after that. Any questions before we end today?
No, from
All right, sounds good, guys. So like I said, marketing is not too far. I think, wait, Shoaib, you're in the market, right?
No, I'm not in the market.
Okay. So one of you guys are in the market from your, I don't know if Zubair is, but one of you guys I placed you guys like a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, we will.
No, it wasn't me, sir.
Okay, that's fine. So just so you know, like when you are in the market, when you are out there looking for a job, your hustling skills comes handy. So if you're a people person, you can talk and you can kind of like, don't just stop talking because you don't know it and you're able to just get around. That is like maybe 50%, help right there. The other 50% will probably come from your knowledge and our help, right? Technical side will help as much as we can, right? Because we understand that even if you know how to say the technical terms, like, how to deal with drop down, how to deal with the specifics of Selenium, you need that boost. So we're going to try to be there. We have a interview support channel, right? Where you'll find 3 of us whose job is just to make sure that whenever you have an interview set up, we either meet you an hour early or we either meet you day before to do a prep and sit down at the time of interview to help you out. So we'll talk about those as well. But remember, you'll get all the help you need. So even if you don't feel 100%, nobody's going to feel 100% at the end of the day. But even if you don't feel 100%, that's fine. We're going to still be able to get a job. All right. I'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.